Atlanta, a bustling city in the American South, was settling into the soft glow of late afternoon. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, classic homes lined the tree-shaded streets. The chirping of birds blended with distant car engines, painting a serene picture of everyday life. Colonel Aaron Brooks, a retired African-American military officer, sat on a wooden bench outside his home. Wearing a faded gray t-shirt and worn jeans, he held a cup of strong black coffee in his hands. As he gazed at the sky, slowly shifting from bright blue to fiery orange, a rare moment of peace settled over him. The long days of intense work and the brutal battles he once faced were now memories. Yet in this quiet moment, Aaron felt a calm within a fragile calm before the storm. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil after a midday rain. From nearby, the laughter of children playing at a local park echoed faintly. This was Aaron's precious downtime, a brief respite from the relentless pace of life. He sighed, recalling his years in the military. He had stood on scorching battlefields where bullets zipped by and life hung by a thread. Now those wars were behind him, but invisible scars lingered deep in his heart and mind. Suddenly his phone buzzed. Aaron's eyes sharpened as he read a message from his old friend, Raphael Carter, a fellow veteran and now a federal law enforcement officer. Aaron, be careful today. There's trouble brewing around Wilkinson gas station. Stay calm. Aaron nodded silently, knowing that peace was fleeting. He never imagined that after years of fighting to protect his country, he would face a different kind of battle at home, a battle without guns, yet filled with cruelty and prejudice, quietly woven into society's fabric. The clock chimed 6 times, signaling early evening. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting soft beams across the floor. Aaron Rose slipped on a light jacket and prepared to leave to fill his car's gas tank before nightfall. What he didn't know was that today's walk to the gas station would ignite a story filled with tension and turmoil, the toughest challenge he had ever faced. Not against a visible enemy on a battlefield, but against a system he once served, a system that might never recognize his service simply because of his skin color. This was the calm before the storm, and that storm was coming fast and unforgiving. Before we get into the main story, drop a comment below telling us where you're tuning in from and what time it is. We'd love to see how far this story has traveled and who it's touched so far. All right, let's get started. As Aaron Brooks walked toward the waste pumps, the fading sunlight cast long shadows across the pavement. The air was warm but heavy, as if warning of trouble just beyond the horizon. A patrol car suddenly pulled up alongside the station, tires crunching over gravel. The door opened, and out stepped Officer Kyle Mitchell, a man in his early 30s, white with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses despite the dimming light. Kyle's posture was rigid, confident in a way that felt more like arrogance. His jaw was set, lips pressed into a thin line. He scanned the area quickly before his gaze settled on Aaron. The look in his eyes was anything but friendly. It was the kind of look that seemed to carry suspicion before a word was spoken. Kyle had been with the Atlanta Police Department for 6 years. Early in his career, he underwent training that, unbeknownst to many, fostered bias and suspicion rather than justice and fairness. His instructors often emphasized maintaining control in high-risk neighborhoods, frequently painting Black and brown communities as dangerous, no matter the context. His superiors praised him for taking charge in difficult situations. But behind the scenes, Kyle's record was dotted with complaints, allegations of excessive force, racial slurs, whispered in hallways, and an unwillingness to listen to those he deemed lesser. Now, as he stared at Aaron Brooks, a man calm, composed, wearing a simple shirt and jeans, Kyle's mind raced with assumptions he didn't even bother to hide. This is the kind of person who thinks the world owes him something, Kyle muttered to himself, his voice low and bitter. Like he's above the law. Aaron noticed the man's stare but said nothing. He continued filling the tank, eyes steady, refusing to meet that cold gaze directly. There was a history behind that look, a long, painful legacy Aaron understood all too well. Kyle approached his boots, heavy on the concrete. "Hey, you. Step away from the pump," he commanded sharply, voice carrying authority but lacking respect. Aaron turned slowly. "Is there a problem, officer?" His voice was calm but firm. Kyle smirked, his hands resting on his hips. "Yeah, you match the description of a suspect involved in a stolen vehicle a few blocks from here." Gotta check your ID. Aaron's eyebrows knitted slightly. Officer, I'm a retired colonel in the Army. I've just come from a meeting with veterans. Here's my military ID. He held out a wallet with the card clearly visible. Kyle snatched the ID roughly. He scanned it but barely glanced at the details. Instead, his suspicion deepened. A colonel, huh? Doesn't mean much around here. I'm the law. Aaron held his ground. With all due respect, officer, I'm not a threat. I'm just here to fill my tank. Kyle's lips curled into a sneer. Don't play smart with me. Hands where I can see 'em. At that moment, a few bystanders paused, sensing tension. A woman pushing a stroller slowed down. A man fixing his car across the street stopped and looked over. The air thickened with unease. Kyle reached for his radio voice sharp. Dispatch, I've got a suspicious individual refusing to comply at Wilkinson Gas. Aaron's face remained calm, but inside a familiar knot of frustration tightened. He had faced worse under fire, but this was a different kind of battle. The man who was supposed to protect and serve was instead wielding suspicion like a weapon aimed squarely at him. Kyle continued louder this time. I said, hands up or I'll have to take you in. Aaron complied, raising his hand slowly. His voice didn't waver. Officer, please verify my ID before taking any action. Kyle ignored the plea. I'm tired of your attitude. You think you're special? You're just another suspect. Then without warning, Kyle moved quickly, grabbing Aaron's arm, twisting it behind his back with enough force to cause sharp pain. Don't test me, Kyle hissed. You're under arrest. Nearby, a young man pulled out his phone and started recording. Others exchanged uneasy glances, whispering among themselves. Aaron took a deep breath. His years of discipline held firm. No anger, no resistance, only the quiet strength of a man who knew this was about more than just one arrest. Kyle leaned in close, voice dripping with contempt. You're going to learn your place today. Aaron's eyes locked with Kyle's. I've spent my life defending this country, officer. I deserve better. But Kyle only tightened the cuffs. The afternoon that began with peaceful routine had now spiraled into a moment of injustice. And the man standing at the center of it all was about to make sure the truth would not be ignored. The gas station was quiet except for the hum of the pump and the occasional chirp of a bird settling in for the evening. Aaron Brooks stood by his black SUV, the hose tucked neatly into the gas tank, when suddenly Officer Kyle Mitchell's voice cut sharply through the stillness. Step away from the pump, Kyle commanded, his tone cold and unforgiving. Aaron turned slowly, sensing the sudden change in atmosphere. There was no warning, no polite introduction, just a demand that felt like an order in a war zone rather than a casual request at a neighborhood gas station. Is there a problem, officer? Aaron asked, keeping his voice calm, steady, a calm that came from years of discipline and experience. Yet beneath it lay a simmering tension he couldn't ignore. Kyle stepped closer, eyes narrowing behind his dark sunglasses. You match the description of a suspect involved in a stolen vehicle incident nearby, he said brusquely. Show me your ID. Aaron reached into his wallet and produced his military identification card. I am Colonel Aaron Brooks, retired from the Army. I just came from a meeting with veterans. Here is my ID. Kyle barely glanced at the card. His hand tightened on the ID. His jaw clenched. A colonel, huh? Doesn't mean you're above the law. Aaron held his ground, voice firm. Officer, I'm here to pump gas. There is no reason for suspicion. Kyle's expression darkened. You think you're special, don't you? Acting like the world owes you something? Aaron's eyes remained steady. I don't think that. I just wanted to be treated with respect. Kyle scoffed. Respect is earned. Right now, you're a suspect. The tension thickened. Around them, a few customers slowed down, sensing the brewing conflict. A woman paused with her child, and a man working on his car glanced over, concern flickering in his eyes. Kyle's hand moved to the radio clipped to his shoulder. Dispatch. I have a suspect refusing to comply at the Wilkinson gas station. Request backup. Aaron sighed quietly, feeling the weight of the injustice pressing down on him. This was more than a routine stop. It was a moment where his dignity was being tested. Please, officer, Aaron said calmly. Verify my ID before taking any further action. Kyle ignored the plea. Hands where I can see him. Now. Aaron raised his hand slowly. I'm cooperating. Without warning, Kyle grabbed Aaron's arm and twisted it behind his back with a sharp pain that radiated up his shoulder. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," Kyle said, voice low but threatening. Aaron gritted his teeth but did not resist. The strength to fight back was not what this moment demanded. Nearby, someone began recording on their phone. A quiet murmur spread through the bystanders. This was no longer a private confrontation, it was a public spectacle. Kyle tightened the cuffs around Aaron's wrists. "You're under arrest." Aaron's gaze met Kyle's again, unflinching. "I've dedicated my life to serving this country, officer. I deserve better than this." Kyle's response was a sneer. "You're just another criminal in my book." The words hung heavy in the air, marking the beginning of a battle far beyond this gas station. Aaron was no stranger to fighting injustice. But today the battlefield was not foreign soil. It was home. The crowd watched silently, some in shock, others in anger, but all aware that what they were witnessing was not just an arrest, it was a profound act of injustice. And from this moment, nothing would be the same. The cuffs clicked shut around Aaron Brooks's wrists, tight, but not enough to break the skin. Yet it was the sting of humiliation and betrayal that cut deepest. Kyle Mitchell's grip on his authority seemed to tighten with every passing second. The man who should have protected and served was instead wielding his power like a blunt weapon, with little regard for fairness or truth. "You think showing me that ID makes you untouchable?" Kyle sneered, pulling Aaron roughly to his feet. Aaron's posture remained calm but resolute. "Officer, I've already presented my military ID. I'm not resisting. Please verify it before proceeding." Kyle ignored him. Instead, his voice rose with impatience and disdain. "I don't have to listen to your orders, Colonel. You are under arrest for suspicion of involvement in a stolen vehicle incident. Cooperate, or I'll make things worse for you." Aaron's eyes searched Kyle's face, trying to find any sign of reason or humanity. But all he saw was a wall of cold prejudice. Kyle barked into his radio. "Dispatch suspect is non-compliant. Requested immediate backup." Nearby witnesses watched uneasily, their murmurs growing louder as Kyle's aggressive behavior escalated. "What are you doing?" a woman called out, clutching her child tightly. "This is an abuse of power," another bystander whispered to his friend. Kyle shoved Aaron against the hood of a nearby car, pressing down hard. "Hands behind your back now." Aaron complied, though the pressure caused a sharp ache in his ribs. He could feel the burning eyes of the crowd on them, sensing their growing outrage. "You're overstepping," Aaron said, voice steady despite the pain. "There is no evidence against me. You have no right to treat me like this." Kyle sneered. "I'm the law here. You're just another suspect in my eyes." The words struck like a blow. Aaron's mind flashed back to years of service missions in dangerous lands, protecting strangers and compatriots alike. Yet here on home soil, he was stripped of dignity and respect, reduced to a suspect by prejudice. The scene grew tenser as Kyle's aggression intensified. Enough, a firm voice rang out. From the crowd stepped a man wearing a police jacket with federal insignia. Raphael Carter, a former soldier and Aaron's trusted friend. Kyle turned, eyes narrowing. "This doesn't concern you, Carter." Raphael's gaze was steady. "Actually, it does. Aaron Brooks is a retired colonel. I know him personally. You're abusing your authority." Kyle scoffed. "And who made you the judge around here? I'm here to make sure justice is served, not twisted." Raphael moved closer, hand on his radio. "Back off before this escalates." Kyle hesitated, eyes flicking between Raphael and the growing crowd. Aaron seized the moment. "Officer Mitchell, you have my military ID. You have no cause to treat me this way. Let this end now." Kyle's face flushed with anger. "You think you're above me?" "You're not." Raphael stepped forward. "Nobody's above the law, Kyle. But the law protects everyone equally. You're failing that test." Tension crackled in the air like static electricity. Bystanders raised their phones, capturing the confrontation in real time. The weight of public scrutiny pressed down on Kyle, forcing him to back off slightly. "Fine," Kyle muttered. "I'm calling this in for an internal investigation." "Don't think this is over." Raphael nodded to Aaron. "Stay calm. We'll get through this." Aaron exhaled slowly. Despite the pain and humiliation, a flicker of hope remained. The battle had begun, and he was not alone. 2M.
Bist down. Gå.
Despite the rough handling, the cuffed hands, and the cold accusations, Colonel Aaron Brooks did something remarkable. He remained composed. In that instant, amid the chaos of suspicion and injustice, he found a strength deeper than anger. The gas station, once peaceful and calm, had turned into a tense theater. Bystanders held their breath, watching Aaron with a mixture of concern and disbelief. Many expected him to lash out to resist the humiliation, but Aaron stood tall, shoulders squared, breathing steady, embodying a quiet power. "You don't have to do this," Aaron said calmly to Officer Mitchell, his voice firm but not confrontational. "I am a citizen and I deserve respect." Kyle sneered, but Aaron's calm was unshakable. This wasn't Aaron's first encounter with adversity. His military service had tested his mettle countless times. The battlefield had demanded courage under fire discipline, under pressure. And it had forged a man who knew that true strength often meant holding steady when the world tried to break you. His mind flickered to other giants who had walked similar paths. Martin Luther King Jr., who preached peace in the face of hatred. King, who taught that dignity and nonviolence could uproot the deepest injustices. And Colin Kaepernick, the athlete who took a knee to stand for what was right despite the backlash and sacrifice. Aaron thought about their courage and resolve and drew from it the resolve to face this moment with the same unwavering spirit. Nearby, whispers floated through the crowd. "That man's got the heart of a lion," one observer murmured. Another said quietly, "It's the calm that's the real power." Raphael Carter, standing a few feet away, caught Aaron's eye and nodded in silent support. He recognized that Aaron's strength wasn't just in his rank or his past. It was in his ability to hold on to dignity when everything was being stripped away. As Kyle barked more orders, Aaron didn't flinch. "Just verify my identity." "Let me go. I'm not your enemy," Aaron said. Kyle hesitated. His grip faltered for a moment, but the years of indoctrination of mistrust held him fast. Yet Aaron's calmness was more than a personal trait. It was a statement. In that moment, it said to everyone watching that no one should be broken by unfairness. That dignity, even in chains, became a symbol, a beacon for others who face discrimination and abuse every day. A mother clutched her child tighter, tears welling up. A teenager recorded the scene, his phone capturing not just the injustice, but the unyielding human spirit resisting it. For Aaron, the moment was not just about self-preservation. It was about bearing witness to a greater truth. He thought of countless others who had faced similar moments, who had chosen peace over rage, hope over despair. The gas station became a stage where courage was silently displayed. And while the storm raged around him, Aaron's steadiness offered a quiet promise that justice, respect, and humanity would not be forgotten. The tension at the gas station was thick enough to cut with a knife. Kyle Mitchell's grip on Aaron Brooks' arm tightened, as if squeezing the very dignity from the man he was arresting. Bystanders watched in stunned silence, phones recording every moment, their eyes wide with disbelief. Then from the edge of the crowd, a figure stepped forward with measured purpose. His presence commanded attention, a tall, confident man in a dark jacket marked with the insignia of the federal law enforcement. His gaze locked onto Kyle, unwavering and sharp. "Enough," the man said firmly. "This stops now." Kyle spun around, surprise flashing across his face. "Carter, what the hell are you doing here?" "Raphael?" Carter's voice was calm but resolute. "I'm here to make sure justice is done, Kyle. And right now, you're violating that." The crowd murmured. Some faces brightened with hope. Others stiffened, wary of the confrontation. Aaron relaxed slightly, recognizing the man immediately. Raphael was not just any federal agent. He was a brother in arms, a man who had once fought alongside him in the most dangerous theaters of war. During a fierce battle overseas, it had been Aaron who had pulled Raphael out of the line of fire, risking his own life without hesitation. Raphael had vowed to stand by Aaron then, and now in this moment of injustice on home soil, he was here to fulfill that promise. Kyle sneered, stepping forward aggressively. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job." Raphael raised a hand, signaling for calm. "You don't get to abuse your power. Aaron Brooks has shown you nothing but respect and cooperation." Aaron looked between the two men, one representing a law clouded by bias, the other embodying integrity and protection. "Raphael," Aaron said quietly, "thank you for coming." Raphael nodded, his eyes never leaving Kyle. You're not alone in this, Aaron. I won't let this slide. Kyle's lips curled in disdain, but he hesitated. The eyes of the crowd, the recording phones, and Raphael's unwavering stare formed a web of accountability around him. Let's take this somewhere more official, Raphael said, pulling out his radio. I'm requesting immediate internal affairs review on this stop. Kyle growled under his breath but took a step back, unwilling to escalate the situation further, under the watchful eyes of a federal agent. The crowd breathed a collective sigh of relief, but the gravity of the situation remained. This was just the beginning. As Aaron rubbed his sore wrist, Raphael placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You did the right thing by staying calm. Aaron smiled faintly. It wasn't easy, but it's the only way to win these battles. Raphael nodded, and we'll fight it together. The gas station, once a site of confrontation, now felt like the front line of a greater fight, one for justice, respect, and the truth. The air at the gas station crackled with tension, thick as the evening haze settling over Atlanta. What had started as a routine stop spiraled into a clash of power and principles embodied in two men who stood mere feet apart. Officer Kyle Mitchell, a symbol of authority marred by bias, and federal agent Raphael Carter, a beacon of justice determined to right the wrong. Kyle's jaw tightened, eyes narrowing as he stared down Raphael. You think you can waltz in here and tell me how to do my job? This is my jurisdiction. Raphael's voice was steady, unwavering. Kyle, your job is to serve and protect, not to abuse your power or racially profile citizens. Aaron Brooks here has done nothing wrong. Your actions are unjustified. Kyle scoffed, stepping closer, his tone edged with hostility. You don't get to lecture me on justice. You don't know the streets like I do. This guy, he's hiding something, and I'm not going to let him slip through. Aaron watched silently, the weight of the confrontation heavy on his shoulders. He knew the tension was bigger than himself. It was a battle between entrenched prejudice and the pursuit of fairness. Raphael took a measured breath. That kind of thinking is exactly what erodes trust between law enforcement and the communities we serve. You're allowing bias to cloud your judgment. That's a mistake that puts lives at risk. Kyle's face reddened, his grip on his service weapon tightening. You're idealistic. This isn't some classroom debate. Real cops deal with real threats. Raphael didn't flinch. And real justice requires real accountability. There's a difference between suspicion and evidence, Kyle. You crossed that line. Around them, the crowd watched in growing unease. Some whispered in agreement with Raphael's words. Others remained silent, caught between fear and hope. Kyle barked into his radio. I'm holding the suspect. Request immediate backup. Raphael responded calmly, requesting internal affairs to review this stop. Abuse of power allegations are on the table. The radio crackled as officers responded, their voices echoing urgency. Kyle turned to Aaron, his expression hardening. You'll answer for this. Mark my words. Aaron lifted his chin, voice steady despite the bruises forming on his wrist. I answer to the truth, officer, and today that truth is clear. Raphael stepped between them, his presence a shield of resolve. Kyle, this conflict isn't personal. It's about protecting the integrity of law enforcement. When officers abuse their power, everyone loses. Kyle's breath hitched for a moment, the fight wavering in his eyes. But years of hardened attitudes refused to yield. This isn't over, Kyle spat before retreating toward his patrol car. Raphael watched him go, then turned to Aaron. You showed incredible restraint. Many wouldn't have. Aaron nodded, a flicker of gratitude crossing his face. Sometimes strength is knowing when not to fight fire with fire. The standoff underscored a painful truth within law enforcement. Battles rage not only against crime, but within the ranks between those clinging to prejudice and those fighting for justice. Kyle's actions were not unique. Too often, unchecked authority breeds misuse. Raphael's intervention was a reminder that accountability must come from within, and that courage is required to challenge injustice head-on. As the night deepened, Aaron, Raphael, and the witnesses at the gas station knew this confrontation was a turning point, a moment exposing the fault lines of power, prejudice, and the fight for equity. Days after the tense confrontation at the gas station, the atmosphere in Atlanta was charged with anticipation. The story of Colonel Aaron Brooks's unjust arrest had begun to ripple through the community and media, sparking discussions about power bias and accountability. Behind the scenes, a quiet but decisive figure stepped into the spotlight: Lieutenant Jessica Lane, a seasoned internal affairs officer tasked with investigating the incident. Jessica was known for her meticulous nature and unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth no matter where it led. Unlike the blustering bravado of some officers, she approached each case like a puzzle, carefully assembling facts and listening to every voice, especially those that might have been silenced. Her office was a stark contrast to the noise outside. Crisp, organized files lined the shelves, and a single photo of her family sat on the corner of her desk, a reminder of why justice mattered so deeply. As Jessica reviewed the initial reports and body cam footage, she noticed inconsistencies that others might have overlooked. The narrative painted by Officer Kyle Mitchell did not fully align with the evidence. She called in witnesses for interviews, customers who had been at the gas station, including the woman with the stroller and the man fixing his car. Each told a story of tension, aggression, and an atmosphere thick with fear. Jessica listened intently, her notes detailed and precise. She understood the systemic challenges, how bias can infiltrate procedures, and how pressure from within the force sometimes muffled complaints. Next, she reached out to Aaron Brooks. The former colonel agreed to meet, offering a calm but powerful recount of his experience. Jessica admired his courage and clarity. "I stayed calm because I knew that losing my temper wouldn't help," Aaron said during the interview. "But I won't stay silent about what happened. This needs to change." Jessica promised him her full support and assured him that her investigation would be thorough. Over the following days, she examined dispatch logs, radio communications, and personnel files. She discovered troubling patterns in Kyle Mitchell's history, past complaints, warnings that were quietly set aside. The more Jessica dug, the more she realized this case was about more than one man's misconduct. It was about the cracks in the system that allowed such behavior to persist. She prepared her report carefully, highlighting not just the individual actions, but the structural failures that enabled them. In meetings with her superiors, Jessica advocated for transparency and accountability, pushing against resistance that preferred to keep things quiet. Her determination sent a clear message: injustice would not be swept under the rug. Outside the walls of internal affairs, the public's attention grew. Local media picked up Jessica's investigation, and community leaders demanded answers. For Aaron, Jessica's involvement was a beacon of hope, a sign that the wheels of justice might finally turn in his favor. "I believe in this process," he said during a community forum, "because people like Jessica are fighting to make it right." Jessica, however, knew the road ahead would be long and challenging. But with every step, she was determined to bring light to the darkness. Her careful, relentless pursuit of truth marked the beginning of a turning point, not just in Aaron's case, but in the fight against systemic injustice. Just days after the tense confrontation at the gas station, a recording began circulating online, an unfiltered window into a moment many wished had never happened, but that the world needed to see. The video, shot by a bystander with a shaky hand but steady purpose, captured the entirety of the arrest. Aaron Brooks, calm and composed, was handcuffed roughly by Officer Kyle Mitchell. The cold disdain in Kyle's voice, the crowd's growing unease, and Aaron's quiet dignity were all laid bare for millions to witness. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire across social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. Hashtags like #JusticeForAaron and #HoldTheBadge trended nationwide, drawing attention far beyond Atlanta's city limits. Comments poured in, some outraged, others supportive, and many expressing a collective frustration long simmering beneath the surface. Local news stations picked up the story. Anchors recounted the incident, often showing clips from the viral footage. Editorials debated the deep-rooted issues highlighted by the arrest, racial profiling, abuse of power, and the urgent need for police reform. Jessica Lane's internal investigation was now under public scrutiny, bolstered by the community's demand for accountability. Statistics began to emerge, painting a stark picture. Studies showed that incidents like Aaron's were far from isolated, with Black Americans disproportionately more likely to be stopped, searched, or arrested without cause compared to their white counterparts. The power of the video was undeniable. It transformed a single act of injustice into a nationwide conversation about systemic racism and police misconduct. Activists organized rallies and peaceful protests. Community leaders spoke out demanding transparency and change. Social media campaigns educated millions on their rights and the importance of recording public interactions with law enforcement. The digital age had given a megaphone to those once unheard. For Aaron and those who stood with him, the video was both a shield and a sword, a defense against erasure, and a weapon in the fight for justice. Yet amid the noise, Aaron remained grounded. "This isn't just about me," he said in a televised interview. "It's about all of us who face injustice daily. We need to come together and demand a system that respects every citizen." The video had done more than document an event, it had sparked a movement. As the public outcry grew louder and more urgent, attention shifted to the man at the center of the controversy, Officer Kyle Mitchell. Behind the polished badge and the uniform was a troubling record that painted a far different picture from the one he tried to project. Lieutenant Jessica Lane, digging deep during her internal affairs investigation, uncovered a trail of complaints stretching back years. It started with minor incidents, reports of excessive force during routine traffic stops, verbal altercations marked by aggressive language, and multiple allegations of racial profiling. More serious accusations followed. Several community members had come forward describing encounters with Kyle, where intimidation and unwarranted aggression were evident. One complaint described a young black man who was handcuffed without explanation and left waiting for hours before charges were dropped. Another involved a woman alleging Kyle used racially charged language during a domestic disturbance call. Despite these reports, the system had done little to hold him accountable. Supervisors often dismissed the complaints as misunderstandings or isolated incidents, failing to recognize a pattern. The culture within the police department seemed to shield Kyle a protective barrier that allowed him to continue acting with impunity. Jessica's report drew parallels to other infamous cases across the country. Officers like Derek Chauvin, whose actions in the murder of George Floyd sparked nationwide protests, or the failure to act in the Breonna Taylor case. These patterns exposed a troubling reality: systemic failures that enabled officers with histories of misconduct to avoid meaningful consequences. Kyle's unchecked behavior wasn't just a personal failing, it was symptomatic of a larger institutional problem. As news of his record leaked, community leaders called for his immediate suspension and a thorough overhaul of the department. At a heated city council meeting, voices demanded justice not just for Aaron Brooks, but for all those affected by years of systemic neglect. A local activist declared Kyle Mitchell is a symptom of a broken system that prioritizes protection over accountability. The police chief faced mounting pressure to respond decisively. His office released a statement promising reforms and cooperation with ongoing investigations. But for many, these promises felt like echoes of past failures. Aaron, meanwhile, absorbed the revelations with a mix of resolve and sorrow. "This isn't just about one man," he told reporters. "It's about a system that allows people like Kyle to operate unchecked." His words echoed the frustration of communities nationwide weary of cycles of abuse and cover-ups. Yet the exposure of Kyle's dark history also became a rallying point, a catalyst for demanding real change. It reminded everyone that justice requires not only confronting individual wrongdoers, but dismantling the structures that protect them. The revelations about Officer Kyle Mitchell's troubling past sent shockwaves through the community, but to many they only confirmed a deeper, more insidious truth that the problem wasn't just one man, but a system designed to protect men like him. Behind the badge and the uniform was a bureaucratic machinery that often looked the other way. Lieutenant Jessica Lane's investigation uncovered disturbing evidence. Multiple supervisors had received complaints about Kyle's behavior, but chose to ignore or minimize them. In internal memos, concerns about his aggressive tactics and questionable conduct were labeled as personality conflicts or isolated incidents. One report recommended disciplinary action after an incident involving excessive force, but it was quietly shelved. Another memo noted Kyle's repeated failure to follow protocol when engaging with minority communities. Instead of corrective measures, he was given additional training, a vague gesture that did little to change behavior. When Jessica confronted the department's leadership, she faced a wall of defensiveness. The department takes all complaints seriously, a high-ranking official insisted. But we must protect our officers and trust in their judgment. Jessica pressed harder. But what about the victims? What about the community's trust? How can that grow when patterns like this go unchecked? The official's response was evasive, a familiar dance of bureaucratic doublespeak. As Jessica dug deeper, she found that Kyle had also benefited from informal networks within the department alliances that shielded him from scrutiny and consequences. She uncovered meetings where senior officers discussed handling complaints discreetly to avoid negative publicity. This culture of silence and protection created a dangerous environment where misconduct could flourish. Jessica's report didn't just document Kyle's misdeeds, it exposed a system of complicity. Community activists echoed her findings at city council meetings, demanding not only accountability for Kyle, but structural reforms to dismantle the culture that allowed such behavior to persist. One community leader said, "This is about breaking the cycle. It's about transparency, responsibility, and a police force that truly serves all people." The mayor announced the formation of an independent oversight committee tasked with reviewing the department's practices and policies. Yet skepticism remained high. Years of broken promises had worn down trust. Aaron Brooks, speaking at a public forum, reflected on the system's failures. "We cannot focus only on one person. We must change the whole system that protects misconduct," he said. His words resonated deeply. The fight was no longer just about one officer's actions, but about transforming the very institutions meant to uphold justice. This moment elevated the story from a personal struggle to a battle against systemic injustice, a challenge requiring courage, transparency, and relentless pursuit of truth.
Leadership tama siya.
As the public outcry intensified and evidence piled up, the case against Officer Kyle Mitchell escalated beyond internal affairs and community forums. The wheels of formal justice had begun to turn, and a new intense battle was underway, one fought not on the streets but in conference rooms, courtrooms, and behind closed doors. The city's legal department convened a discreet meeting at a government building downtown. In a nondescript conference room, a group of key players gathered around a large oak table. Among them were city attorneys, police department officials, representatives from the mayor's office, and high-profile defense attorneys hired by the police union. Jessica Lane was there representing internal affairs, bringing her comprehensive investigation report. Her presence was a reminder of the urgency and gravity of the situation. Across the room sat Aaron Brooks, accompanied by his legal counsel attorneys, seasoned in civil rights and police misconduct cases. Aaron's steady gaze scanned the room, knowing this was the battleground where the fight for accountability would intensify. "This is more than just an isolated incident," Jessica said, firmly addressing the group. "The evidence shows a clear pattern of abuse and systemic failure." One of the city attorneys, a sharp-eyed woman named Rachel Mendoza, nodded. "Our priority is to balance public trust with legal due process. We must ensure transparency without compromising ongoing investigations." The police chief, present but visibly tense, added, "We acknowledge the seriousness of these allegations. We are cooperating fully with all inquiries." Meanwhile, the police union's defense attorney, a gruff man named Thomas Whitman, pushed back. "Officer Mitchell has served this city for years. We question the validity of some complaints and caution against rushing to judgment based on public pressure." The room crackled with tension, the stakes high, as every word weighed heavily. Outside, the media frenzy was relentless. Reporters camped near the courthouse, eager for updates. News outlets broadcast live, dissecting every development. Editorials called for justice, while some voices warned of the complexities in prosecuting law enforcement officers. Social media fueled the fire, with hashtags trending and citizens organizing peaceful protests demanding accountability. Back in the conference room, strategies were debated. The city's legal team prepared for potential civil suits and public hearings. Aaron's lawyers worked to build a case that would not only hold Kyle accountable, but also spotlight the broader issues of systemic abuse. Among the team was Emily Saunders, a young, passionate civil rights attorney who had dedicated her career to fighting police misconduct. She was tireless, often working late into the night, reviewing documents, preparing witness testimonies, and coordinating with community activists. The key, Emily explained during a strategy session with Aaron, is to connect the dots between Kyle's actions and the department's failures. This isn't just about one officer, it's about a culture that enables misconduct. Aaron nodded. It's time the system faces real consequences. As the legal battle gained momentum, public hearings were scheduled, subpoenas issued, and testimonies planned. The courtroom would become the new stage where stories of pain, resilience, and the quest for justice would be told in full. For Aaron, this phase was daunting but necessary, a test of patience, perseverance, and faith in the law. Every hearing, every statement, every piece of evidence presented was a step toward the justice he sought, not just for himself, but for all those silenced by abuse. The legal battle had begun, and its outcome would shape not only the fate of Kyle Mitchell, but the future of policing in the city. In the whirlwind of accusations, investigations, and media attention, Aaron Brooks made a conscious choice, a choice that was not about giving up, but about wielding a different kind of strength. He chose silence. This silence was not born out of fear or resignation, but a deliberate act of resilience and strategy. In the days following his arrest and the unfolding legal battle, Aaron refrained from public outbursts. He declined interviews that would sensationalize his pain or reduce his story to sound bites. Instead, he focused inward, grounding himself in patience and reflection. Those close to him noticed this quiet determination. His attorney, Emily Saunders, once remarked, "Aaron's silence speaks volumes. It's a refusal to let anger or desperation control the narrative." Aaron found solace in the examples of those who came before him, figures who had chosen silence or nonviolent resistance as tools for change. He thought of Martin Luther King Jr., who preached peaceful protest in the face of brutality, turning silence and nonviolence into weapons against oppression. He reflected on Rosa Parks, whose quiet defiance on a Montgomery bus sparked a movement. And he admired Colin Kaepernick, who kneeled silently during the national anthem, igniting conversations nationwide about racial injustice. Aaron's silence was a form of protest, a refusal to be defined by the violence done to him. It was a way to reclaim power in a system designed to strip it away. Inside, the silence was anything but empty. It was filled with determination, hope, and the knowledge that sometimes the loudest statements come not from words shouted, but from dignity maintained. Yet the silence was also a shield. It protected Aaron's mental and emotional health in the face of relentless scrutiny and injustice. Behind closed doors, he grappled with frustration and pain, but he channeled those feelings into the legal fight ahead. His silence invited the world to listen more closely, to look beyond the headlines and see the human story beneath. To understand that justice is not just about loud demands, but about steady, unyielding resolve. For Aaron, this was the calm in the storm, the strength to endure, to wait, and to prepare for the long road to justice. In the wake of the video and the legal battles, the story of Colonel Aaron Brooks transcended his personal fight. It sparked something much larger, an awakening in a community long burdened by injustice. Among those moved by Aaron's courage was a young man named Elijah Thompson. Elijah was a college student, bright and passionate, living just a few blocks from the gas station where the incident occurred. Like many in his generation, he had grown up witnessing the systemic inequalities etched into the fabric of their city. Elijah had seen the news reports, watched the viral videos, and heard the heated debates in his classrooms and on social media. But Aaron's story struck a chord deeper than most. One evening, Elijah found himself at a local community center where Aaron was speaking at a town hall meeting. The room buzzed with energy. Neighbors, activists, students, and elders all gathered to share stories and strategize for change. Aaron's voice was steady as he spoke about dignity, resilience, and the need for systemic reform. But it was Elijah's perspective that captured the room's attention when he stood up afterward. "I'm just one young man," Elijah began, "but I'm tired of seeing people like Colonel Brooks, people who've served this country with honor, treated like criminals in their own neighborhoods." He spoke about the power of his generation, the millennials and Gen Zers who were connected like never before by technology, awareness, and a shared sense of justice. We're the generation that's not willing to stay silent. We're organizing, educating, and holding our leaders accountable. Elijah said, his voice steady but filled with passion. He told stories of protests that had started with just a handful of voices and grown into thousands marching peacefully in the streets. He spoke of online campaigns, petitions, and community programs aiming to build bridges between law enforcement and the people they serve. Elijah's words resonated because they weren't just about frustration, they were about hope and action. His presence reminded everyone that change wasn't just the work of those who had lived through decades of struggle, but also of those ready to carry the torch forward. Community leaders and nodded students exchanged determined glances, and elders smiled with cautious optimism. For Aaron, hearing Elijah's voice was a profound moment. It showed him that his fight was not in vain, that the torch of justice was being passed to a generation ready to challenge injustice on every front. Later, during a quiet moment, Aaron pulled Elijah aside. "You're the future," Aaron said softly. "Remember, this strength comes not just from standing alone, but from standing together." Elijah smiled. "I won't forget. And I'll make sure your story and others like it reach as many people as possible." Together, they embodied the merging of past and future, a partnership fueled by experience and youthful energy. The movement for justice was no longer confined to courtrooms and city halls. It was alive in the hearts and voices of a new generation determined to rewrite their community's story. Behind the public turmoil and media spotlight, another war raged quietly within the walls of the Atlanta Police Department itself. It was a battle not fought with batons or handcuffs, but with whispered arguments, closed-door meetings, and clashing visions of what the force should be. The department's headquarters was a sprawling building filled with offices, meeting rooms, and corridors echoing with the footsteps of officers navigating a shifting landscape. Inside a windowless conference room, a heated debate was unfolding. On one side sat veteran officers and department leaders resistant to change, men and women who had built their careers on the traditions and practices that had long defined policing in the city. Chief Daniel Harper, a man with decades of experience and a reputation for loyalty to his officers, was at the center. His voice was firm but strained as he addressed the group. "We must maintain order," he argued. "Our officers need support, not constant scrutiny. We can't afford to let public pressure dictate every decision." Across the table, Lieutenant Jessica Lane and a group of reform-minded officers pushed back. "We're not here to dismantle the force," Jessica said carefully, "but to ensure it serves all citizens fairly and justly. Ignoring misconduct only breeds distrust." A younger officer named Marcus Fields leaned forward. "We have to face the reality. The community doesn't trust us right now. If we don't address these issues, that gap will only widen." The room was thick with tension as voices rose and fell. Some feared that reform would undermine authority and morale. Others believed it was the only way to rebuild credibility. One officer, a grizzled veteran named Officer Daniels, slammed his fist on the table. "Back in my day, we didn't have to worry about hashtags or protests. We did our job and the city was safer." Jessica responded, "Times have changed. The people we serve deserve respect and accountability. If we don't evolve, we risk losing the community entirely." The debate was more than generational, it was ideological. It reflected a deep divide on how policing should balance power and responsibility. Meanwhile, rumors swirled about who supported reform and who clung to the status quo. Alliances formed quietly, shaping the future of the department. Chief Harper sighed. "Change is inevitable, but it must be managed carefully. We can't sacrifice the safety of our officers or the public." Jessica nodded, agreed, "but that safety depends on trust. Trust we must earn through transparency and integrity." Outside the meeting rooms, rank-and-file officers watched nervously. Some feared reprisals, others hoped for a new beginning. The internal struggle revealed the complexities of reform, how entrenched attitudes and fear of change could stall progress even as communities cried out for justice. For Aaron Brooks and his supporters, the department's internal battles signaled both challenge and opportunity. They knew that true change required breaking through institutional resistance and fostering a culture that embraced accountability. The police department was not a monolith, but a microcosm of society's broader struggles with power, race, and justice. As the internal debate continued, the eyes of the city watched closely, hoping for a turning point that could transform a troubled system into one worthy of public trust. After weeks of tension and resistance within the Atlanta Police Department, a new ray of hope began to emerge. It came not from sweeping reforms imposed from the outside, but from committed individuals within the force who were ready to face uncomfortable truths and lead the charge for change. Raphael Carter and Lieutenant Jessica Lane found themselves at the heart of this movement. Raphael, with his history as a federal agent and his close bond with Aaron Brooks, understood the weight of responsibility that came with being an agent of justice. Jessica, meticulous and resolute, had spent countless hours unraveling the layers of misconduct and bureaucracy that had allowed officers like Kyle Mitchell to operate unchecked. Together, they were appointed special advisors on a newly formed task force dedicated to reforming the department's culture and policies. Their first meeting with the task force was held in a modest conference room, walls lined with whiteboards filled with notes, goals, and strategies. Jessica opened the discussion. Change begins with accountability, but it must be paired with education and community engagement. We can't just punish bad behavior. We must prevent it. Raphael nodded. We have to rebuild trust from the ground up. That means training officers to understand the communities they serve and creating systems that hold everyone to the same standard. The task force included officers from all ranks, community leaders, and experts in law enforcement reform. The atmosphere was charged with determination, yet tempered with the realism of the challenges ahead. Raphael shared his vision. We must listen to the voices often ignored, those of minorities, of victims, and of honest officers who feel silenced. Jessica outlined practical steps, revising use of force policies, implementing bias training, and establishing transparent reporting mechanisms. The room buzzed with ideas, but Raphael and Jessica knew the true test lay in implementation. They began hosting workshops, inviting community members to share their experiences and concerns. Officers were encouraged to participate in dialogues aimed at bridging divides and fostering empathy. One afternoon during a session with young officers, Raphael recounted his own experiences in the military and law enforcement, emphasizing the importance of integrity over authority. Jessica facilitated discussions on implicit bias, encouraging officers to examine their own assumptions and behaviors honestly. Progress was slow, met with skepticism by some and enthusiasm by others. But small victories began to accumulate. An officer who once doubted the need for reform spoke up during a meeting. I never realized how much my perspective was shaped by unconscious biases. This process is opening my eyes. Community members attending the sessions expressed cautious optimism. Maria Lopez, a local activist, remarked, "It's refreshing to see officers willing to listen and learn. It's the start of something's heal." For Aaron Brooks, hearing about these efforts was a balm to the wounds inflicted by injustice. He met with Raphael and Jessica regularly, offering support and sharing his vision for a police force that truly protected and respected its citizens. We still have a long way to go, Aaron acknowledged during one meeting. But I believe in this team and in the possibility of change. Raphael smiled. Change is never easy, but it's always possible. And together we'll make sure it lasts. As night fell over Atlanta, the city felt a subtle shift, not yet visible to all, but palpable to those committed to justice. In the midst of struggle and setbacks, a light flickered at the end of the tunnel. The day of the trial arrived with a heavy weight in the air. Inside the grand courtroom of the Fulton County Courthouse, the public and media gathered in anticipation. This was not just a legal proceeding, it was a battleground where the fates of many intertwined, justice, accountability, and the voices of a community long ignored. The courtroom was packed. Cameras lined the perimeter, reporters scribbled notes, and community members filled the benches, some with faces etched in hope, others with brows furrowed in frustration. At the center sat Colonel Aaron Brooks, poised and dignified, despite the emotional toll of the months preceding this moment. Beside him were his attorneys, prepared to present a case that was as much about systemic failure as it was about individual accountability. Opposite them, Officer Kyle Mitchell, flanked by his defense team, sat with a hardened expression. The weight of the evidence against him was undeniable, but the battle for his freedom and reputation was fierce. The prosecution began presenting a meticulous narrative woven from witness testimonies, body cam footage, internal memos, and the investigation led by Lieutenant Jessica Lane. Emily Saunders, Aaron's lead attorney, spoke passionately. This case is a reflection of a broken system where unchecked power meets racial bias. We ask this court not only to judge the actions of one officer, but to recognize the larger issue at hand. She detailed the moments at the gas station, the unlawful detention, the abuse of power, and the impact on Aaron's life. Her arguments painted a picture not just of a single injustice, but of a pattern that demanded correction. The defense countered, attempting to cast doubt on the motives behind the investigation. They argued that Kyle was simply performing his duties, facing difficult situations under pressure. But the mounting evidence made it clear that this was more than a bad day. It was a symptom of deeper systemic flaws. Outside the courtroom, the public's reaction was fervent. Protests swelled in the streets of Atlanta, peaceful but powerful, with thousands holding signs demanding justice and reform. The media framed the trial as a pivotal moment in America's ongoing reckoning with police misconduct and racial inequality. Editorials compared the case to others that had sparked national outrage, the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Eric Garner, highlighting recurring themes of abuse and the urgent need for change. Human rights organizations lent their voices, calling for transparency and accountability. They urged lawmakers to use this moment to implement comprehensive police reforms. Social media exploded with discussions, videos, and campaigns, amplifying the trial's significance far beyond the courtroom walls. In the courtroom, the trial progressed with intense cross-examinations, expert testimonies, and emotional statements. Aaron took the stand, recounting his experience with calm authority. "I served this country honorably," he said, "but service does not grant immunity from injustice." His words resonated deeply with many, a reminder that respect and dignity must be universal. The jury deliberated for days, the community holding its breath. When the verdict finally came, it marked a historic moment. Kyle Mitchell was found guilty on multiple counts related to abuse of power and civil rights violations. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief and solemn recognition. For Aaron, this verdict was more than personal vindication. It was a beacon of hope for others facing similar battles. The case sparked legislative discussions and renewed commitments to reform policies on use of force accountability and community policing. Yet the journey was far from over. The trial exposed the deep wounds in the justice system, but also illuminated a path forward, one paved by courage, community, and relentless pursuit of fairness. The verdict against Officer Kyle Mitchell sent shockwaves through the Atlanta Police Department and the wider community. What began as a personal reckoning for Kyle became a symbol of accountability and the urgent need for systemic reform. Immediately following the guilty verdict, Kyle's status within the department changed dramatically. Suspended without pay, his badge and firearm were confiscated, and he was barred from any active duty. The department's Internal Affairs Division launched a separate disciplinary process reviewing not only Kyle's actions, but also the oversight failures that had allowed his misconduct to persist. In a tense press conference, Police Chief Daniel Harper addressed the public. His tone was measured but firm. "Kyle Mitchell's actions were unacceptable and do not reflect the values we uphold. We are committed to transparency and will implement reforms to prevent such incidents in the future." The chief announced the initiation of comprehensive reforms, including stricter oversight mechanisms, improved training on implicit bias and de-escalation tactics, and the establishment of an independent civilian review board. However, the ripple effects extended beyond Kyle himself. The department faced increased scrutiny from city officials, civil rights groups, and the media. Trust that had already been fragile was now strained further, sparking calls for a cultural shift within the force. Community leaders emphasized that Kyle's case was not an anomaly, but indicative of systemic issues that demanded sustained attention and action. The real lesson here, said activist Maria Lopez, is that accountability must be systemic, not just individual. We need to build a police culture rooted in respect, empathy, and transparency. Inside the department, the atmosphere was one of uneasy reflection. Officers were encouraged to participate in open forums discussing past failures and envisioning a new path forward. Lieutenant Jessica Lane and Agent Raphael Carter played pivotal roles in these efforts, guiding initiatives aimed at rebuilding trust and fostering a culture of integrity. Kyle's fall from grace served as a powerful deterrent, signaling that misconduct would no longer be tolerated or swept under the rug. Yet for many, the journey toward justice was far from complete. The department grappled with balancing support for its officers while meeting the community's demand for genuine reform. Aaron Brooks remained a vocal advocate, using his platform to call for sustained vigilance and meaningful change. "The verdict is just the beginning," he stated. "True justice requires ongoing commitment from the police, the city, and all of us." The story of Kyle Mitchell and Aaron Brooks became a touchstone, a case study in both failure and hope. It highlighted the complexities of policing in modern society and underscored the power of accountability to inspire transformation. As the city moved forward, the lessons learned from this chapter echoed loudly. Responsibility cannot be an option. It must be the foundation of every action taken by those sworn to protect. The story of Aaron Brooks did not end with the courtroom verdict or the disciplinary measures against Kyle Mitchell. For Aaron, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by growth, resilience, and the powerful transformation from victim to emblem of a larger movement. In the weeks and months that followed the trial, Aaron found himself increasingly in the public eye. Invitations to speak at community events, universities, and civil rights organizations became part of his routine. Yet he remained grounded, always returning to the core message that had carried him through the ordeal of dignity in the face of injustice and the relentless pursuit of change. Aaron's voice carried the weight of experience and a calm authority that inspired those who heard him. At a rally attended by thousands, he stood on a makeshift stage beneath the sweltering summer sun, speaking not just for himself, but for countless others who had suffered in silence. "I didn't choose this path," Aaron said, "but I choose to walk it with courage and purpose. We are more than our pain. We are the hope for a better future." His words resonated across generations, bridging divides and sparking conversations in homes, schools, and workplaces. Beyond the speeches and public appearances, Aaron invested deeply in mentorship. He worked with youth programs focusing on empowering young people of color to find their voices and assert their rights. Elijah, the young man inspired by Aaron's story, became one of his closest allies in these efforts. Together, they organized workshops, community dialogues, and advocacy campaigns aimed at dismantling systemic racism. Aaron's journey also led him to collaborate with lawmakers pushing for reforms in police training, accountability, and community engagement. Despite the spotlight, Aaron remained humble, often reflecting on the quiet strength that had carried him through his darkest moments. He remembered the lessons of silence, patience, and dignity tools that had protected him and now empowered him to lead. At times, the weight of being a symbol was heavy. The expectations of community and media scrutiny were daunting. But Aaron embraced the responsibility, knowing that his story could spark change far beyond his own experience. In conversations with friends and family, he often spoke candidly about the emotional toll and the importance of self-care and support networks. Aaron's transformation was not just personal, it was communal. His journey became a beacon illuminating the path for others facing similar battles. His life illustrated the power of resilience and the impact one voice can have when raised for justice. As his story spread, it challenged narratives that sought to silence or diminish the struggles of marginalized communities. Aaron Brooks had become more than a victim of injustice. He was a symbol of hope, strength, and the enduring fight for equality. As the story of Aaron and Brooks and the battle for justice reverberated through the streets of Atlanta and beyond, it became clear that this was more than a singular event. It was a mirror reflecting society's ongoing struggle with inequality, prejudice, and the abuse of power. Standing before a diverse crowd at a community gathering, Aaron's voice carried a weight that demanded attention not just as a victim or a survivor, but as a catalyst for change. This fight he began is not mine alone. It belongs to every person who believes in fairness, dignity, and the promise of justice. The faces before him were varied, young and old, different races, backgrounds, and beliefs, but united by a common yearning for a better future. Aaron's message was simple, yet profound. Change begins with each of us. He spoke of responsibility, not just that of law enforcement, politicians, or institutions, but of every individual in society. We cannot wait for someone else to fix the system, he said. We must all be active participants in shaping it. That means standing up when we see injustice, educating ourselves and others, and holding those in power accountable. His words echoed the lessons learned through his journey from silent endurance to vocal advocacy. He urged the crowd to recognize their own power in creating a fair and just world. Every voice matters. Every action counts, Aaron continued. Whether it's voting, volunteering, speaking out, or simply listening and learning, we all have a role. He acknowledged the challenges ahead, the resistance, setbacks, and the slow pace of progress. But he also emphasized hope, the hope born from solidarity, courage, and unwavering commitment. Together, we can build a system that protects human rights and serves every community with respect, Aaron affirmed. The gathering ended with a collective sense of purpose, a renewed commitment to justice. As people dispersed, inspired and energized, Aaron's call lingered in the air, a reminder that change is possible when responsibility is embraced by all. Aaron Brooks carried more than just scars on his skin. He carried memories that never faded. The battlefield had been a place of duty and survival, but also of loss and haunting silence. Night after night, in the quiet of his home, the echoes of gunfire and the faces of fallen comrades visited him like ghosts. He remembered the smell of smoke and sweat, the sharp crack of bullets slicing through the air, and the heavy weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. But those external enemies were only half the battle. The true fight was internal. After returning from service, Aaron faced a war within himself. Memories of firefights gave way to nightmares. Moments of joy shadowed by grief for friends, lost too soon. The psychological wounds were invisible, but no less real. He learned that strength was not only about physical endurance, but about confronting fear, guilt, and pain head-on. Aaron often compared the enemies outside the visible threats with the battles raging inside his mind. Each demanded courage, but the latter required a different kind of resilience. This inner conflict shaped who Aaron was. It taught him patience, humility, and the power of endurance. When the gas station incident occurred, it triggered not just a confrontation with injustice, but a rekindling of this internal struggle. Aaron found solace in the lessons from war to stay calm under pressure, to hold on to hope even when surrounded by darkness. His journey became a testament to the strength of the human spirit forged in fire and refined by experience. While Aaron faced his battles publicly, there was a quieter struggle happening at home. His family, his wife Maria, their 2 children and aging parents felt the ripple effects of the injustice he endured. Maria watched with worry as Aaron navigated the legal battles and media spotlight. She juggled work and parenting, striving to provide stability amid chaos. Their children sensed the tension, asking questions they were too young to fully understand. The event brought stress, anxiety, and moments of fear into their daily lives. Aaron's parents, who had raised him with the values of honor and resilience, felt a mix of pride and helplessness. The generational pain of racial discrimination weighed heavily on them as they witnessed their son's fight. This family dynamic highlighted a broader truth. The impact of racial injustice extends beyond individuals to families and communities. Psychologists note that trauma from such events often manifests in increased anxiety, depression, and feelings of isolation among family members. Maria often reminded Aaron, "We're stronger together. Don't carry this alone." Their shared strength became a foundation for healing and hope. Aaron's family story added depth and humanity to the fight against systemic racism, illustrating how personal resilience is bolstered by love and unity. Aaron's experience was a powerful narrative, but it was also part of a larger troubling pattern. Across the United States, stories like his had emerged before, echoing a long history of racial injustice within law enforcement. The names George Floyd and Breonna Taylor resonated deeply, tragic reminders of lives cut short and the urgent demand for change. Like Aaron George Floyd was subjected to excessive force that sparked global outrage. Breonna Taylor's death during a flawed police raid ignited protests nationwide. These cases revealed systemic failures, a lack of accountability, racial bias, and the devastating human cost. Comparing Aaron's story to these high-profile incidents offered insight into the persistent nature of these issues. While Aaron survived, his story underscored the everyday reality of discrimination and abuse many face. It highlighted the necessity for reforms that go beyond individual cases to address institutional culture. The lessons drawn from these comparisons fueled advocacy and policy changes, emphasizing transparency training and community policing. Aaron's narrative stood as a beacon of hope within this context, a call to recognize both the pain and potential for transformation. Understanding the law is essential to grasp the full impact of Aaron Brooks's encounter with Officer Kyle Mitchell. At its core, the case revolves around fundamental civil rights every citizen holds, designed to protect against abuse and ensure justice. In the United States, the Fourth Amendment guards against unreasonable searches and seizures. It sets clear boundaries for police conduct, requiring that officers have reasonable suspicion or probable cause before stopping, searching, or detaining someone. When Kyle demanded Aaron's identification without clear cause, he crossed a legal line. The law mandates that stops must be justified by specific articulable facts, not assumptions or biases. Furthermore, the use of force is strictly regulated. Officers must employ the minimum necessary force to carry out their duties. Kyle's aggressive arrest violated these standards, particularly given Aaron's calm compliance and valid military ID. Legal experts often highlight such cases to illustrate the gap between written law and actual practice. Misunderstanding or ignoring these legal protections not only harms individuals, but undermines public trust in law enforcement. Kyle's errors were not merely procedural, they were violations of constitutional rights that the justice system must rectify. Aaron's case became an educational example, helping the public understand their rights and the limits of police power. This knowledge empowered communities to demand accountability and fairness. In the digital age, media and social platforms have become powerful tools in shaping public perception and driving social change. The video capturing Aaron's arrest was a catalyst, sparking widespread outrage and conversation. Traditional news outlets covered the story extensively, bringing it into living rooms across the nation. But it was social media that truly amplified the message. Hashtags trended, shares multiplied, and discussions flourished. This instant global reach gave a voice to those often unheard and highlighted systemic issues of racism and police misconduct. However, with this power comes responsibility. The media's portrayal influences public opinion and can sway legal outcomes. Responsible journalism requires balancing storytelling with facts, avoiding sensationalism, and respecting privacy. Activists and community leaders leverage media to organize protests, educate the public, and pressure officials. At the same time, social media exposed divides with misinformation and polarization, sometimes complicating the narrative. Still, the case showed how media can democratize information, mobilize communities, and hold power accountable. It reminded us that the pen and the camera are mightier than ever in the fight for justice. Not all in uniform accepted the status quo. Within the police force, there were those who recognized the damage caused by bias and worked tirelessly to challenge it. Among them was Sergeant Lisa Nguyen, an Asian American officer with over 15 years of service. She often spoke out against racial profiling and advocated for community policing approaches that emphasized respect and understanding. In interviews, Lisa shared her struggles navigating a culture resistant to change. "It's not easy pushing back when peers see you as soft or not one of us," she admitted, "but standing up for fairness is part of the job." Similarly, Officer Marcus Johnson, an African-American veteran, recounted how he mentored younger officers to recognize and overcome implicit biases. He emphasized the importance of training self-reflection and accountability. "Change has to come from inside," Marcus said. "We have to lead by example." These officers often faced isolation, but found strength in solidarity and support from reform-minded colleagues and community members. Their stories underscored the complexity of change, how it requires courage, not just from activists outside the system, but from insiders willing to confront uncomfortable truths. Aaron Brooks's journey inspired many such officers, showing that justice is a shared responsibility. Together, these voices within law enforcement illuminated pathways toward a more equitable future. The moment at the gas station was not just a physical confrontation, it left deep psychological scars. Aaron Brooks, like many who endure trauma, faced the invisible wounds of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. PTSD can manifest in flashbacks, anxiety, nightmares, and an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. For Aaron, the sudden violence and betrayal by an authority figure reopened old wounds from his military service and challenged his sense of safety. The weight of the incident pressed heavily on his mental health, affecting sleep, concentration, and relationships. But Aaron's journey did not end in despair. Recognizing the importance of healing, he sought help through therapy and support groups tailored for trauma survivors and veterans. These spaces provided a safe environment to process pain, share experiences, and learn coping strategies. Therapists helped Aaron develop mindfulness techniques, grounding exercises, and resilience-building practices. Healing was neither linear nor easy, but with time and support, Aaron began reclaiming his peace and agency. His story highlights the broader need for mental health services accessible to victims of police trauma, particularly among marginalized communities. Today, organizations across the country offer specialized counseling for those affected by police violence, recognizing that recovery is integral to justice. Aaron's healing journey stands as a powerful testament to resilience, reminding us that confronting trauma openly is a courageous act. The ripple effect of Aaron's experience extended far beyond his personal life, sparking a powerful wave of community response in Atlanta. Neighborhoods that had long felt marginalized found a renewed voice through peaceful protests, vigils, and community forums. Groups formed to support victims of police misconduct, offering legal assistance, counseling, and advocacy. Local churches and civic organizations hosted healing circles, fostering solidarity and collective empowerment. The case catalyzed a shift in public consciousness, with many residents reevaluating their relationship with law enforcement and demanding transparency. Inspired by Aaron's story and the nationwide movement for police reform, grassroots campaigns pushed for tangible policy changes. Atlanta saw new measures introduced, such as mandatory body cameras, de-escalation training, and civilian oversight committees. Similar reforms had been adopted in cities like Minneapolis and New York, following high-profile cases demonstrating that activism combined with policy advocacy could drive change. The community's engagement underscored the power of collective action in challenging systemic issues. Through unity and persistent effort, residents of Atlanta turned pain into purpose, laying groundwork for a more just and inclusive future. One of the clearest revelations from Aaron Brooks's case was the glaring deficiencies in police training. Too often, officers are sent into the field with little preparation in critical areas: cultural competency, emotional regulation, legal rights, and human dignity. The lack of thorough ongoing training on diversity and implicit bias leaves many ill-equipped to serve communities with fairness. Kyle Mitchell's actions were a stark example, his mindset shaped by flawed instruction and unchecked prejudice. Recognizing this, reform advocates pushed for comprehensive education reforms. Cities across the nation have begun implementing mandatory bias awareness programs, crisis intervention training, and community engagement workshops. Programs like procedural justice training emphasize respect, transparency, and fairness in police encounters. Some departments have introduced peer counseling and emotional resilience coaching to help officers manage stress and avoid excessive force. Technology also plays a role. Body cameras coupled with real-time monitoring aim to ensure accountability. But education is more than skills. It's about shifting culture. True reform demands ongoing dialogue between law enforcement and communities, with training designed collaboratively. Aaron's story underscores the urgent need for these reforms, highlighting that effective policing requires empathy and respect as much as authority. Aaron Brooks's journey did not end with justice in court. It was just the beginning. Together with allies like Raphael Carter and Jessica Lane Aaron, continues to champion police reform and social justice. They organize community forums, mentor young activists like Elijah, and advocate tirelessly for policy changes. Their story inspires a new generation to take up the mantle of justice, reminding us that change is possible when we refuse to remain silent. But this journey requires all of us. Each voice, each action contributes to a movement that seeks a fairer, more just society. As Aaron often says, justice is not a destination, it's a continuous journey. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the story of Aaron Brooks, a story of courage and justice and hope. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Join the conversation. Share the truth. Because silence in the face of injustice is complicity, and sometimes the most powerful weapon we have is our voice. Stay vigilant, stay strong, and remember, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King Jr.